Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is August the 28th, 2024. It has been 3,866 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 189 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 186 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 23 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. There are a lot of map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south, and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There aren't a lot of changes from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, I won't mind. I won't even know. 1. Autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October the 1st is unrealistic without redeploying additional assets from Ukraine. 2. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 3. The continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure are increasing the possibility of an accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants caused by the permanent loss of external power connections. 4. We maintain the unwillingness of the Biden administration to permit Ukraine to use provided weapons for strikes more than 40 kilometers from the 1991 state border with Russia has forced Ukraine to develop its own deep strike capabilities, proving that escalation threats from Moscow are hollow. 5. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a complete failure that only encourages Russian acts of aggression, including more frequent and deeper violations of NATO alliance airspace and acts of espionage in Europe and North America. 6. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia has decided to ignore Ukraine's Kursk offensive and commit all available combat power in the Donetsk, New York, and Pokrovsk areas of operation. This is the last day for this entry. 7. Despite the new increase in operational tempo, we maintain Russia has no strategic reserve available to mount an effective defense of the Kursk region, continues to suffer unsustainable losses, and has committed almost all of its available conventional forces in Ukraine. 8. We maintain the Kursk counter-invasion is strategically sound, despite Ukrainian forces lacking the resources to defend New York and Donetsk and the approaches to Pokrovsk and Solidovo. 9. We maintain that Russia will achieve the operational goal of capturing New York and Donetsk in 2024. And we further assess that for Ukrainian forces, an extended battle in an urban environment is ill-advised. 10. In our assessment, the risk of an attack on Ukraine by the armed forces of Belarus is low. 11. The Russian economy is weaker than reported. 12. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 13. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. We start today's podcast with the action report summary. Yesterday, Russia carried out 184 discrete assaults, the second highest number of attacks ever recorded. Through August the 27th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks rose to 155. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 86 airstrikes, dropping 110 bombs on civilian and military targets in Ukraine. Russian ground forces conducted approximately 4,300 fire missions using tubed and barrel artillery. In the Kursk region, Ukraine controls 1,295 square kilometers, with another 327.5 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,622.5 square kilometers. Ukraine also controls 93 hamlets, villages, settlements and tactically significant areas, such as the Gazprom gas compressor and metering station at Sudzha. Of those, 33 settlements are under full administrative control. The Glushkovsky salient, where 2,500 to 3,000 Russian troops are isolated, is 562 square kilometers, a change of 2.5 square kilometers from yesterday. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in the northeastern part of Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. We begin in the Kursk region of Russia, in the Glushkovsky area of operation, or AO. Another wet crossing on the same river disappeared north of Glushkova. Did Mr. Hymas visit? A Ukrainian source claimed that the Russian pontoon bridge northwest of Zvane that appeared on August the 26th was also destroyed. New videos support Russian claims that Ukraine is interdicting troop movements on the Glushkova-Rilsk road. North of Sukhaya, 2 Russian armored vehicles traveling south toward Glushkova were destroyed. In Rilsk, a Russian military vehicle was destroyed on the E38 highway Same River Bridge, and Russian mercenary mail blogger Romanov Light reported that the Kursk-Rilsk highway was closed to civilian traffic due to Ukrainian drone attacks. The Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armored, reported fighting in the areas of Kulbaki and Nova Ivanovka, including claiming artillery and airstrikes on the latter. They did not provide any supporting evidence, and the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, is maintaining tight operational security. Adding weight to the Russian claims, Ukrainian sources claimed that Troitskoe was captured, which would facilitate a Ukrainian advance on Kulbaki from the south. In the Korenevo AO, Armored claimed without evidence that fighting continued in the direction of Krasnooktyabrskaya. Multiple sources reported fighting continued in or near Komarovka. Armored also claimed that the VKS carried out airstrikes on Ukrainian positions between Snagost and Korenevo. Geolocated videos, which you can find in today's situation report, there's more information in the podcast description, confirmed that the area was bombed. The video showed the VKS successfully hit 2 empty fields and some trees. There has been no change in the situation in Korenevo, with Ukraine holding control of the Korenevo village east of the Krepna River. In Krymiana, a Russian video showed a Ukrainian tank approaching the village from the east, exiting the woodblock south of Kalinov. The tank fired into Krymiana before being hit by a Russian one-way drone and exploding. We went back to the Sentinel Hub 2LA satellite images because the video showed a gross fire spreading around the tank. Based on the available information, we assessed the video was from August the 27th. That's important. The new intelligence confirmed that Ukraine controls the woodblock south of Kalinov, Russian forces occupy Krymiana, and Ukraine controls the area south of the village. Armored reported fighting continued in the area of Krymiana, and NASA firms showed significant combat-related fires in the village and Ukrainian-controlled Zhuravli. There were also fires on the Krymiana-Sheptuhovka road, the primary Russian geolog into the Krymiana salient. In our assessment, our map accurately represents the Krymiana salient and shows that Ukrainian forces are slowly advancing. In the Lgov Operational Direction, or OD, Russian propagandists claimed that 13 of the 60 members of the 1009th Regiment were able to break out of the IK-12 women's penal colony at Malaya Loknya. We cannot confirm the veracity of the claims, but we noted in the August 26th sitrap that there was a notable decline in fighting in the settlement. If the report is accurate, then Ukraine has gained military control. Armored and Russian propagandist two majors reported heavy fighting continued, making no mention of a breakout by surrounded troops. Yesterday I told you about the bravery of the 1st Chechen Akhmat Tiktok Brigade and their claimed victory in the strategically important hamlet of Nizhnya Paravaya. Today, NASA firms indicated the entire area was on fire. In the Bolshoe Soldatskoe AO, Ukrainian forces were observed using the R-200 highway north of Martinovka, indicating there was a new advance. Based on the new intelligence, we expanded the area under Ukrainian control. Ukrainian sources claimed without evidence that the village of Kruglik was captured. In the Sumy Oblast of Ukraine, Russian sources claimed an M142 GMLRS, better known as HIMARS, was destroyed on the western outskirts of the city of Sumy. The video is heavily edited, and the first rocket launch was more consistent with an air defense missile than a rocket. You can watch the video for yourself. The only thing that appears to have been destroyed were trees. In Klementovo, the VKS bombed the already destroyed bridge over the Vorskla River. You should check out the video. The bridge has been destroyed for years. Residents in the Sumy Oblast accused Russia of poisoning the same river at Tetkina, reporting that water has turned black and smells putrid, and all aquatic life is dying. I have just a brief theater-wide update for the Ukrainian counter-invasion. Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, Rafael Grossi, visited the Kursk nuclear power plant. He noted that the, quote, peculiarity of the Kursk NPP is that RBMK-type reactors operate there. He expressed concern that the reactor cores are located in regular buildings, making them vulnerable to artillery and drone strikes. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, reported that Ukraine captured almost 600 Russian soldiers in the first 3 weeks of the Kursk counter-invasion. This is significantly lower than earlier media and local reports. He also said that Russia withdrew approximately 30,000 troops from Ukraine to defend the Kursk region of Russia, but Moscow concentrated its combat potential in the Pokrovsk area.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Let's not forget about my home. Here is what happened in Ukraine, starting in the Kharkiv Oblast. In the Liptsi-Vovchansk AO, fighting continued in Vovchansk, near Staritsa, and in southern Hlyboka. There were no changes in territorial control. Further south, in the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces carried out over 20 attacks north of Sinkivka, east of Stepovanovo-Selivka, and from occupied Pishchane in the direction of Kolesnikivka. All ended in failure. In the Luhansk Oblast, west of occupied Svatove, Russian attacks near Stelmachivka and in the direction of Grekivka and Druzhelyubivka were repulsed. West of Kremenna, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Nevske, Novosadove and Terny. There was no change in the situation. Now let's talk about the Donbass, where we start in the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Beginning in the Siverskoe, Russian troops carried out 4 attacks west of occupied Zolotarivka, south of Ivanodarivka, and southeast of Vyimka. In the Konstantinivka, Russian forces attempted to advance in the direction of Grigorivka without success. Fighting continued on the western edge of the canal district of Chasiv Yar and in the forested regions on the western edge of Ivanivska. Russian troops are trying to push Ukrainian forces out of southern Klishchiivka and carried out assaults southeast of Andriivka. The situation in the Donetsk-New York remains difficult. Heavy fighting continued on the edges of Toretsk near Druzhba and Pivnichne and in the southeastern corner near Zalizne. We geolocated numerous videos but could not identify any changes in territorial control. GSAFU reported fighting near Nelipivka and within New York. Russian assaults in the direction of Sukha Balka were repulsed. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, we begin in the Pokrovsk, where the Ukrainian withdrawal may appear organized, but in the direction of Selidove, defenses are in collapse. Yuri Butusov, the editor-in-chief of Cenzor.net, said, quote, "The situation in the Pokrovsky direction is no longer critical. The situation is already catastrophic. Despite Zelensky's promise, no normal fortifications were built there. Now there is a complete loss of control at the level of operational tactical departments." Near Pokrovsk, Russian forces remained in the southeastern part of Grodivka, where they made a small advance. The situation in Novogrodivka is critical, although we did not geolocate any new Russian advances. Evacuations continued in Pokrovsk, where the situation was described as tense. East of Selidove, Ukrainian defenses are in collapse. It's the right word. Russian forces raised a flag in Korenevo and captured Memrik. Yesterday, I told you our analysts had assessed that fighting may have started. Heavy fighting was ongoing in Mikhailivka and the eastern edges of Selidove itself. It is unlikely that Ukrainian forces remain east of the Karlovsky Reservoir and Vovcha River at Yasnobrodivka. We always advise you to follow the official recommendation of government officials in Ukraine and to make your own risk assessment. Due to the E50 highway being severed, if you live in Ukrainsk, Girnik, Kurakhivka or the immediate area, you should evacuate immediately. Do not attempt to head north to reach the E50 highway and always listen to official recommendations. In the Kurakhove, it is likely that Ukrainian forces have withdrawn or are in the process of withdrawing to the west bank of the Karlovsky Reservoir in Karlivka to avoid encirclement. Fighting continued on the outskirts of Nevelske, with Russian troops trying to advance from occupied Staromykhailivka. A Russian squad made a picture report in western Konstantinivka, raising a flag on the remains of a home. It was a false capture claim, but it shows how thin the Ukrainian defensive lines have become. Finally, in the Vuhledar, Russian forces crossed the T-532 highway and raised a flag 2.3 kilometers from Vodyane. The capture of Vodyane would sever the main gelock that supports the Ukrainian garrison defending Vuhledar. Russian forces continued to carry out attacks in the direction of Vuhledar from Volodymyrivka and failed to advance in the direction of Prechystivka. The truth matters. It's all as bad as it sounds. Hopefully General Syrsky has a plan. We're going back to Russia to talk about areas outside of the Kursk Oblast. Ukrainian drones struck the Kamensk-Shakhtinsky fuel depot in the Rostov region of Russia, causing a massive fire. According to Russian authorities, all drones were intercepted and the fire was caused by falling debris. The facility has 32 tanks, with up to 5 in flames. In other news, for the 10th day, the strategic fuel storage facility in Proletarsk continued to burn out of control. In the Kharkiv region, Russian officials reported that a drone struck the oil depot in Kotelnich, setting at least one storage area on fire. Kotelnich is over 1,100 kilometers from Ukraine, and this is the first time the Kharkiv Oblast has been attacked. Voronezh governor Alexander Gusev claimed that drone debris fell near the open-air ammunition depot in the forests near Malaya Mezhenka. A fire broke out nearby but did not reach the munitions. 2 villages were evacuated. Here is my Theaterwide update. Someone changed the sign, because it's been 0 days since a Russian government official threatened nuclear war. Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov said, quote, "We are now confirming once again that playing with fire, and they are like small children playing with matches, is a very dangerous thing for grown-up uncles and aunts who are entrusted with nuclear weapons in one or another Western country. Americans unequivocally associate conversations about the Third World War as something that, God forbid if it happens, will affect Europe exclusively." Unquote. The latest threat came due to discussions about permitting Ukraine to use longer-range weapons like Storm Shadow, Scalp-E or ATACMS to strike military targets in Russia. Lavrov accused the West of escalation and said that the NATO alliance was asking for trouble. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was seen weeping, rocking in a corner of the White House, muttering, "We don't want to escalate. One day I want normal relations with Putin again." I made that last part up. Maybe. On nuclear threats, we're over it. You should be over it too. After 30 months of this, there are no red lines. The United Kingdom reiterated that they fully support the use of Storm Shadow cruise missiles to strike military targets in Russia and again accused Washington of blocking their use. Asked about Washington's policy during a Pentagon press conference, Department of Defense spokesperson General Pat Ryder repeated that the policy has not changed. The NATO alliance has likely delayed the decision too long, with Ukraine announcing it has developed and successfully tested its own short-range ballistic missile called Sapsan. Sapsan has a reported range between 500 and 700 kilometers, which would put Moscow in range of the new weapon. The solid-fuel missile has a 480-kilogram warhead. It is unclear when the missile will reach operational status. Had the United States and Germany not blocked the use of provided weapons, they would have still influenced the target packages. With Ukraine developing its own capabilities, Kyiv won't have to ask permission. Ukrainian forces have been searching for Russian red lines for 23 days in the Kursk Oblast and still haven't found them. Ukraine called for an emergency NATO Council meeting in Brussels, which will commence today. The topic was unknown, but could cover many areas, including the record-setting Russian missile attack on Ukraine, delayed armed shipments, creating an air defense-only no-fly zone in western Ukraine, the continued blocking of long-range weapons to strike Russia, the troop build-up on the border of Belarus, or the situation in the Pokrovsk front. Ukraine has also asked for an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. The discussion will be about Russia's August 26th missile and drone attack. Russia will hold its monthly meeting on August 30th to complain about Western military aid being provided to Ukraine. President Zelensky announced that in September he would present Ukraine's 4-point plan for victory over Russia to United States President Joe Biden and 2024 presidential candidates Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The Ukrainian 28th Mechanized Brigade shot down a Russian Su-25, and the video of the incident left no questions on whether there was an airframe loss. The plane was too low for the pilot to eject. Say the line, fighter bomber. If you know, you know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.